recording and we're going to begin. Hi, my name is Renee Hobbs, and tonight's Wednesday, March 1st. We're here talking about how we're teaching about fake news. And we planned this webinar on super quick notice, so I am really, really grateful. I'm really, really grateful for you for showing up. I'm sharing my speaker view now, and I see Kara, Frank, Jared, Yanti, Amanda, and Gina. And why don't we just go around the room and talk a little bit about the contexts where we may have the opportunity to teach about fake news. Who wants to go first?
Gosh. I'll go. Sorry about the spotlight here. All right. Hi, I'm Kara, and I teach media and digital literacy classes at Thurston High School. And
what state is that in?
That's in Michigan, in this near Detroit. And we have been spending some time in the last few days getting into an intro to our news unit, which is much earlier than it normally is, but because news seems to be a really big thing these days, I decided we needed to go early. So I was going to start talking about censorship with my students, and unfortunately, they really didn't understand what censorship is and how it relates to them here in the United States. So I backed up and have started working on some lesson plans through the Newseum this week, and we've been talking about 5 freedoms that are not available to people in some other countries. And I have a couple of examples of student work that I can show you later on when it's appropriate.
Great, that's nice. Thanks for introducing yourself to us. Who's next? We're introducing ourselves to each other and talking about the contexts, the different contexts in which we work.
Hi, I'm Frank. I am writing and rhetoric faculty at the University of Rhode Island. So in all of my courses, I have the opportunity to venture into the discussion of fake news. Right now I'm teaching a digital literacy class, writing 235. So we'll be exploring it intensely over the next 3 weeks. And it's interesting, one of my students is a textiles major. And today we were talking about propaganda and advertising, where they don't use words, but they use the way they market their products. And it opened up a whole other issue for me about what's true and what's not true. And she's going to explore that. So that's going to be fun.
Cool. So it broadened right away. Thanks for introducing yourself. Amanda, how about you next?
Hi, I'm Amanda Murphy. I'm a social studies teacher at Westerly High School in Westerly, Rhode Island. And I teach civics primarily. And obviously with civics, I mean, I think that teaching about media and students' consumption is it's pretty high level. So they need to learn a lot about how to interpret what they're consuming. And especially with this news cycle and this political climate, I've had the opportunity for the last couple of months to really dig into the news and how they interpret headlines and fake news. And it's pretty refreshing, though, to hear from students that they're like, Mrs. Murphy, we don't click that stuff. The stuff you guys click on, we're not, tempted to do that. So it's been eye-opening for me to know what they know, but also to kind of have them dig into it a little bit more.
Nice. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Yanti and Elizaveta, will you introduce yourselves and talk about the context in which you're teaching about fake news?
Hi, my name is Elizaveta Friesen, and I'm an affiliated faculty of the Media Education Lab. I'm currently not teaching, but I am obviously surrounded with all the different discussions about fake news. So I'm thinking about it all the time. And I'm currently writing a book, a media literacy book that looks at media literacy as the skill that allows us to think deeper about our involvement in communication processes that create the culture around us. So I look at the fake news from this perspective, from the perspective of the importance of looking at both sides of the argument. And for me, it's important to discuss how the debate about fake news can contribute to polarization, because one side accuses the other side, and it's so difficult to understand what's really going on, because both sides sometimes are right and wrong in some ways. So this is my context.
Nice. And that concept of polarization is going to be one we're going to think a lot more about tonight. So thanks for opening it up. Yanti?
Hi, I'm Yanti Jonathan Friesen. I'm the Associate Director of the Media Education Lab. I'm teaching at Central Connecticut State University. We hosted 3 weeks ago the Northeast Media Literacy Conference, and we had a very live discussion about fake news, and we heard so many different opinions and different takes on fake news. And then last week I participated in a lecture in our university that the journalism department invited Craig Silverman from BuzzFeed, who is doing the fact-checking and looking at the phenomena of fake news and truth in journalism for years. He's been publishing about it. It was really interesting to see the way that a journalist looks at fake news and how he documented and really sharing that it's not a new thing. He showed us the front page of the New York, I don't remember, from 1836, the front page showing the creature that lives on the moon, and that if you use like a telescope, you can see those creatures that looks like vampires. And so, but he had very interesting insight that we're going to share later on about like how to define fake news. But it was interesting to look from the journalism point of view, while us as media literacy educator might look at it a little bit differently.
Nice. So we're introducing ourselves, and we're talking a little bit about the context in which teaching fake news is relevant to us. Jared?
Yeah, and actually it's some familiar faces on here, so I'm excited. I come from a different perspective. I am also not an educator. Hey, Yanti. I am the brand manager for a company called Tribeworthy. So part of this and getting on this phone call is diving into what you guys are doing around fake news with media literacy, because it will only help our efforts.
Great. We are glad you're here. Spencer, can you introduce yourself and talk about the context in which you're thinking about how we teach about fake news?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Spencer Brayton. I'm the library director at Blackburn College in Illinois. I co-teach a media and information literacy course with my colleague, Natasha Casey, and that's sort of where we discuss fake news. I also discuss similar concepts in first-year writing courses and some political science courses. So that's sort of where I'm coming at it.
Nice. So glad to have an academic librarian on the team, a teacher librarian. Pam, can you introduce yourself and talk about the context in which this topic is relevant to your work?
Yeah, hi, I'm Pam Steger. I'm in Providence, Rhode Island, and I come from a prevention background. And that's what led me to media literacy. And I was lucky enough to take the Media Literacy Scholars Program and have been interested ever since. I'm a private contractor and consultant now, and I consult with the Media Ed Lab and am working with Renee on a book about library film education. I'm just interested in it as both a citizen and a writer, and a media literacy practitioner. I think my audience at this point in time are my Facebook and Twitter followers, because I'm trying to do as much fake news education there as possible. Really interesting I've come across in the for 3 years since the Russian invasion and the fake news glut there. And that is led by University of Kiev journalist professors, graduates, and students. And I would love to see something like that here.
Aha, very nice. So you're making the global connection. So glad you are. Matt, Gina, and Zoe, and Emily, if you're around, can you introduce yourselves and talk to us a little bit about the context in which fake news is relevant to your work and interests?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. So I'm Emily LeMay. I'm the Children's and Young Adult Librarian at Mount Pleasant Library in Providence, and I had the pleasure of speaking with Renee earlier today. And I'm also making pasta salad in the background.
You got to eat.
Yeah. So it's fake news is really relevant to my work because I work with kids, obviously, and I really love working with teens. We have a really good active teen group at the library after school, and also specifically coming to my teen club. And I really want to make sure that they are ready to vote for in the next election. I want to make sure they make informed decisions, and I want to make sure that they, can help protect themselves through voting, because a lot of them are minority students, and a lot of these policies that are coming about now are going to affect them most. So I want them to arm themselves with the truth.
Nice. And we're looking forward to hearing about your experiences with your program. Matt, you can introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm a STEM and tech integration specialist at a charter school in Minnesota. And I'm also one of the teacher co-founders of Docent.edu. And so the whole like fake news thing has been pretty exciting, because for a number of years I would always do as a science teacher like bad science, like fake science, or like dihydrogenmonoxide.org and the Northwest tree octopus, and so just sort of like that stuff of like people kind of falling for fake and bad science, and so it's really kind of made this pretty mainstream for all subject areas now.
Cool, absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about that kind of pedagogy where we, take them to a fake news site and kind of shock them, right? Zoe, can you introduce yourself to us and talk to us a little bit about your interest in fake news? Your microphone?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, guys. I'm sorry. I just got out of the class. I'm in my car. My name is Zoe Wang. I'm a PhD student at URI in RIG. I'm interested in pretty much popular culture and social media. Especially lately, I have got into the YouTube culture a lot. I think that like within the YouTube community, the culture is very dynamic. And there are really a variety of sources of media are having their venues on YouTube, and it's also a very kind of interactive sphere. So I think in that term, fake news is relevant to what I'm interested in, because the sources are so diverse and their interactions are very dynamic.
Nice. And it's changing all the time. That's what makes it hard to teach about. Right?
Exactly.
So yeah. Gina, can you introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about your interest in teaching fake news? Gina, I'm not sure if you're really here. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And here's the plan that we have for tonight. I think what we're going to do tonight is something like this. We've introduced ourselves, so we kind of get a sense of this idea that the practice of teaching fake news is going to vary depending on the context and the situation. There's no one right way to do this. Depending on the context and situation, the way you teach about fake news is going to be different. But what we thought we would do is kind of three parts. Number one, we'd like to model a couple of lessons. Number two, so we're going to model 2 lessons kind of just briefly to feel what those lessons are like and talk a little bit about the pedagogy. Then we're going to actually do some group discussion around the insights that we're gaining as we teach about fake news and some of the challenges that we also are encountering. And then we're going to end by sharing some resources. So that should take about 35 or 40 more minutes. But here's our activity. This is an alternative to lecturing. There's so much to know on this topic, and boy, it's a bore to lecture, isn't it? So the activity is called Scavenger Hunt. Select a concept from the list. Explain it in your own words or find a good definition. Find an example online and display it, that's a typo, and display it, then explain how it illustrates the concept. So there's your list. You guys can see it now, right? Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen and you see that list of words. All right, good show. So I'd like you to pick a word from the list, right? I'd like to see if you can explain it in your own words. And then I'd like you to find an example that illustrates the idea and share your screen. And you can do that in any order. Sharing screen is really easy on Zoom. You just kind of take your cursor and go down to the bottom, and up pops a little share screen button, and you share your screen. But let's start with definitions. What's a word on this list that you think you can define and explain in your own words? Somebody just needs to take the lead and go for it.
Filter bubble.
Yeah.
Who said filter bubble?
I did.
Go for it. Talk us through it.
All right, so filter bubble. So we live by the algorithm in our online community, in our online world, and it creates the filter bubble around us that gives us the news that it thinks we should get. And it's built around how we choose our own links throughout our website adventures. So the example I use with my students is if you and I were sitting next to each other and we both searched Egypt, you might get pyramids, I might get revolution.
Ah, wait a second. Explain. How come we might get those different results?
Because my interests are going to take me more into political issues. So my students' interests are going to be probably less so. They're going to be more about just kind of, popular culture. And that's going to make the difference in how our algorithms are built.
Okay, that's a good start. We are off to a good start by talking about filter bubbles. Does anyone pick a different word?
Censorship?
Yeah. Oh.
Amanda.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, so I think that natural kind of partner to filter bubble is echo chamber. When social media, especially Facebook, you're surrounded by the people that you are have like mind with, right? So the only results that you're going to get back in terms of who you should be friends with are the people that are of your same mind, that share the same beliefs. So you have that chamber that you're contained in, and you only hear what you want. You only get the responses back from, you can share out your opinion and you get those opinions back that, you like and appreciate or on your, on your political spectrum, I guess. So I say echo chamber and filter bubble, they kind of go hand in hand.
Are they identical concepts or how are they different as you guys see it?
I think they're different, but I think that they're both based off of how that algorithm, kind of predicts what your interests are. And then with that, it also predicts who shares those same interests. So they kind of partner with one another.
Yeah, what I like about you guys are clearly talking about, you introduced yet another word, Amanda, that's not on my list, but I'm writing it down. I want to put it on my list. That word is algorithm, right? That's a word that's not going to be familiar to a lot of people, but you just explained how it's influencing the information that I tend to receive. Awesome. Okay, so who's next? There's our list. Pick a word and explain it in your own words, then give an example.
I wanted to use satire, and if I can share my screen.
You can.
This is a website that got a lot of attention lately. So I'll let you look at it and see. So is that like fake news and kind of similar to the Onion kind of thing? As I scroll down, you can see it's hilarious, but some would really accuse it as like a website that really go and spread fake news.
Well, you can also say it's
Ruth Bader Ginsburg's highly anticipated album debuts at number 1. Wow, what a great example.
That's
Now you
awesome.
call that satire, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
if we look at like satire, like what there is one down here. I don't know if it's gonna about Facebook. Am I gonna get there? Yeah, anyway, I cannot find it. So, but the idea is that, okay, so you're creating a website that is completely satire, but if somebody would take it like seriously, would that be considered news or fake news? And how do you learn to discriminate between a website that is satire or not? For example, there was this, I think, Guatemalan newspaper that used a picture of Alec Baldwin, but they were seriously talking about Trump. And they just used his impersonation from SNL, not knowing that it's Alec Baldwin and referring to like a serious Trump picture.
Right.
So even journalists can have those like mistakes between satire and reality and news.
Right. Great observation, Yanti. And I especially appreciate how your example illustrates that you really have to have a lot of background information in order to recognize satire, right? So very young children will not be able to recognize satire because they lack the world knowledge to recognize what is being made fun of. Okay, cool. Let's go back to the Spencer.
I think that's a great example too, because a lot of times teachers will tell students, and then it becomes ingrained in the student, that anything that a website that ends in a .org or a .gov or a .edu is perfectly fine. It's very credible and authoritative. And I think that's a good example to use in a class when an instructor says, yeah, if it's .org, go ahead and use it to support your claim if it's a first year writing class. And that's a good example to show, to say that's not always correct. And so I appreciate that example.
Nice. Emily, you were talking about that with me earlier about your sense of that giving advice that you can rely on the extension .gov.edu is actually turning out to be really poor advice for helping students evaluate credibility.
Yes. Well, yeah. So, I mean, .gov sites have always been dependent upon the government, like who's behind the government at the time. It's just, I mean, in my opinion, in the past, they were, whatever side of the fence they were on, they were probably more reliable than a lot of the stuff that's on there now in America. But that's my bias. But yeah, we were just talking, I did a workshop the other night about how in the Bush years, .gov websites wouldn't have put out, the example was a lot of information about the benefits of medical marijuana because the administration was not for it. During the Obama years, there would have been information about it, and it can change. And that, there are plenty of .com websites that are viable and good sources of information, but not always, and they're usually just out to make money and sell advertising space. And there's plenty of .org websites that are viable, but also not. So it's not as simple as it's often boiled down to be.
I really think that is a big idea for tonight's session. We are trying to avoid those shortcut thinking and realize that there's no real shortcuts to teaching about fake news, and that's partly why tonight's topic is so interesting. All right, well, let's just play this game 2 more times, and then we'll move on. There's your list of words, ladies and gentlemen. Pick one you'd like to define that you think you can explain in your own words, and then give us an example. Who'd like to go next?
Renee?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? It's Gina.
Hi, Gina.
Hi. I like to go with the term fake.
Oh, yeah, the term fake. Define it.
Well, I think define fake, something that is untrue. And this is problematic. And I think really one of the reasons media literacy is so needed is how news is actually constructed. So I didn't have the opportunity to introduce myself, but I'm the program chair of digital communication at Georgian Court, and I teach digital and visual literacy. I teach news writing and reporting and a variety of other courses. And I see with my students that they really struggle with the idea of balance and being able to have multiple points of view. So is fake news something that's entirely not true, or is fake news something where a person is misquoted? Does that really justify as being fake news, or did the reporter make an error? And I think we're in a very difficult time right now, because if everything is being labeled as fake news, if it has an inaccuracy, then nothing can be trusted.
Nice. So you're helping me add words to my list, like mistake, accuracy, and inaccuracy. Those distinctions are super relevant and important. Marvelous. Okay, back to the word list.
Well, I was going to say propaganda.
Uh-huh.
So I could define.
How do you define it?
Well, sort of my, snarky definition would be old school fake news. But I think that propaganda usually has a bit more of a political slant to it. And even though I think it's the current political climate that has, birthed the term fake news. And so there's a lot to that. I'm thinking about the website that Jonathan just showed us, and, that would come under fake news. And certainly it's maybe intended to sway public opinion, but which is what propaganda does. But it's also, that site is sort of like an entertainment site, so it's hard to, I think it's hard to define both of them as to which fits into which category.
Really, really, really true. So, of course, I'm fascinated with the topic of propaganda. I'm teaching a course on propaganda this semester. And one word that is on our chart that I guess we'll use to conclude this portion of the activity is the word clickbait, right? I think the word clickbait is a really important word to teach about fake news. It's the term used to essentially describe the economics of online media. So blog websites like Vox or BuzzFeed, authors get paid per click, right? So the more outrageous the headline, the more shocking and startling or counterfactual or bizarre, the author gets paid by the number of clicks. So the term clickbait has been used to describe the way in which you are lured to click, even if it's worthless information, because the click has monetary value. And I think helping students understand the economics of online media is a really important part of teaching about fake news, because it helps us understand something about authors' motives sometimes, right? Because sometimes motives are purely economic. And one really great, easy read that even high school students, I think, would appreciate and enjoy is a great book called Trust Me, I'm Lying by Ryan Holiday. Ryan Holiday writes an expose of his work in the public relations industry, and he unpacks the economics of clickbait. I think that's an important part of teaching about fake news. But now let's continue our mission and kind of model one more lesson. Oh, so maybe I should just say, so this idea of a scavenger hunt, pick a word, define it, think of an example, find an example, can be understood as superior to the teacher lecturing. Because I could lecture about all those concepts, right? Why is this, what makes the scavenger hunt more a better pedagogy than the teacher lecturing? And how might you adapt the scavenger hunt for your own classroom?
So I think that this strategy is really cool because students feel that they own the information that they found and they are actively engaged. They're not just passive consumers of some knowledge. So it's not the banking system of education. It's they are also having fun because it's interesting, and they're working in groups. They're communicative, communicating with each other. So there are a lot of elements that make this watch really great for exploration of this topic.
Yeah, there are some advantages to the scavenger hunt, but there might be some disadvantages too.
Well, it both assumes and acknowledges that students might have prior knowledge and maybe even greater knowledge in some areas than the teacher does.
It might have some advantages and disadvantages. Can you think of any possible disadvantages to the scavenger hunt activity?
Well, the disadvantage I think here is that students might not pick things they don't know about, so they won't take risks to try to learn more.
There you go. So you'd be stuck in rehearsing the familiar, right? And not going out onto a limb. That's a great point. That could happen. Any other advantages or disadvantages of the scavenger hunt activity for dealing with the vocabulary of fake news? All right, so we have at least identified some of those. Let's take a look at the second activity we're going to talk about. We're just going to do this one really briefly because I think it's really familiar. It's close reading, right? So you read, you view, or you listen, then you explore the 5 critical questions of media literacy. Who's the author and what's the purpose? What techniques are used to attract and hold attention? What points of view and values are represented? How might different people interpret it, and what is omitted? And so let's do this one as a collaborative team. All right, we're looking at a tweet. I'm not even sure if it's fake news, but let's go through the 5 critical questions. Who's the author and what's the purpose? What techniques are used to attract and hold your attention? What values are represented? How might different people interpret this? And what is omitted? Who wants to go first?
Well, I can go first. I can say that it attracts our attention with this interesting image. So if it were just text, then we might just scroll down. But because there's this image, with the colors also attracting us, and this motto or logo that the author used also are interesting. So that might be something that makes us pause and look more attentively at this message.
Nice.
Yeah, and just to kind of, from a student perspective, getting them to look at the author. I mean, you can look at his picture, you can look at his name, but then going into what his actual Twitter handle is. So clearly he has a connection to science, biologist Dan, and so students need to look further than just whatever the name is and go a little bit deeper when we're looking at who the author is. I mean, obviously when we're looking at checking our sources, we have students do that all the time. And so they need to do a little background information, try to find him elsewhere and see what else is, what does he do? Look at his about,
But
information.
I would even argue, if I can jump in, Gina, here, that even if you did that, you don't really know that that's him. I mean, he could put any picture there, any link there, any other information there. It's not a verified account. We don't really know who this person is. So
good point. One thing I'm wondering about, Gina, is I'm wondering whether the claim is true. Trump can defund the EPA and send environmental statutes.
Right.
That's a claim. And because this message matches my own beliefs, I tend to want to believe that's true. But I'm really not sure if it's true. I'm not sure if the presidential authority is adequate to defund and eliminate a regulatory agency. So I wonder if it's true or not.
Renee, I think the point that you make about your own biases, and I find personally that a visual like this, like a meme or some kind of a cartoon or anything like this, is extremely seductive to me. And I tend to take it at face value and run with it before I think about it. I have an emotional response because it fits my bias, and I run with it. And then I go back and I'm like, oops, you got me. And especially in work that I am, that embarrasses me sometimes. But that's how seductive I find it to be.
An interesting point. Other perspectives on this little a little video? How might different people interpret this message differently?
So I looked at something that might look completely ridiculous. But, when I looked at the tweet, I looked downstairs to see how many down into like the how many replies, retweets, likes, and then there was this weird kind of symbol. You see the yin yang kind of thing with two, and then I was thinking, oh, wait a minute, it might be a fake tweet. So I went to Twitter to find him. That's why I put the link to his tweet to see that it's actually a real tweet. And then this thing doesn't exist there. So I was like, so that was like my first thing of everything was actually to look at this thing that was unfamiliar from what I'm using to Twitter to say, wait a minute, is that a real tweet or not? And eventually it is. But
does anybody know what that little symbol next to the heart represents? Does that mean it's been turned into a moment or a storify? The little yin yang symbol? Yeah, we don't know. All right. Well, I want to make sure we have time for a little bit more open discussion. I've definitely put some other examples. Here's a marvelous tweet worth critically analyzing. So that one we could have a lot of fun with that one. But now I thought maybe we could have some open conversation about this question right here. So what are we learning as a result of our experiences teaching fake news, right? So what are the insights, the opportunities, and the challenges or pitfalls of this complex and important topic? What are you discovering from the practice of teaching about fake news? What are the opportunities, the challenges, and the delights and the tribulations?
Gina, I think it's very important for students to actually learn how to write news themselves. So in the creation process, they are challenged to identify what types of quotes they might put in, whether or not are they accurate, are they being fair, are they being balanced, what images would they use, are those images alarming, is their headline accurate, is the headline alarming, what is their own point of view. So I think some of the challenges are students don't really understand how news is written, and so they're not, I think in order to analyze and evaluate something properly, you really have to understand how that is put together. You need to understand how it's produced. So a challenge would be in classes where students don't have the opportunity to do that, can we effectively get them to understand the challenges of writing an article?
Ooh, very great observation. I have a question for you, Gina, and then maybe for anybody else who has an opinion about this. Should we design assignments or activities where we ask kids to make fake news? Why or why not? It seems like it would be awfully fun.
It does.
Would it be a good idea or a bad idea to have kids make fake news? What's your perspective on this?
I haven't thought about it. I don't know how I feel about this. Ethically, I mean, if we want to teach a student how it's created, then yes, teach them how to do it. But do we really want to encourage them to write things that are not true? When I have a hard enough time teaching them to write things that are balanced, that are true. So, I don't know.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
I think that it's actually a great idea. I didn't think about it before, but because the students feel that all the news that they receive, or might feel it coming from some kind of authority that they're not questioning, because it's like, if it's there, this information, that probably somebody with expertise put it there. So if they have fun with it, goofy with it, then they feel like, oh, so everybody can be goofy with it. Everybody can, create this. If I can do it, so it means that things that are out there might be created by other people like me, and why should I trust them?
Other perspectives? Should we teach kids how to make, or should we let kids make fake news as a learning activity, or what could be the bite back?
On a related note, I had a student or a team of students do a presentation about privacy, and they created a fake Facebook account and tried to add the instructors as well as all the students in class to see if they would get a bite and add them, and just created a fake profile that they were students at the institution. So I think it's kind of related, but I think it worked really well in terms of discussion and the presentation and privacy. How why students added them, why they did they dig into to see any more about this fake student, or did they just say, oh, it says Blackburn College, so I'm going to add you automatically without digging further because they didn't want to do that much work.
So why did that assignment work? What made that effective as a form of learning, do you think?
I think it engaged maybe their own emotion and thought process in terms of how they see themselves on social media and how they how they engage socially there.
Yeah. In a way, that emotional dimension got tied to that sort of kind of abstract concept of privacy, right? That's a very interesting idea. Okay, so other challenges, opportunities, insights that you're gaining from teaching about this topic?
I would add that, I'm all about media production, and I think producing fake news might be beneficial, but producing fake news just for the production side to have the students express their transgression won't be really beneficial. The idea is the reflection. So I think with what Spencer was talking about, going over it and understanding why they did it, what are the pros and cons, and like how it can be perceived. And so doing a really deep analysis of what they produce, how they produce, what is the effect and circumstances that they did it in order to achieve what they want to achieve, that would be beneficial. So what I'm looking at is that the whole discussion about fake news needs to be open, because as we say, fake news can have different ways of looking at it. People can say that satire, propaganda. Again, the Washington Post also have been accused of fake news with the whole fiasco about the Vermont power facility that they said that was hacked, that they didn't check their resources. And they need to publish an apology for that. So really looking at seeing that even mainstream media, even reliable places like the Washington Post, sometimes do bad journalism and sometimes screw up. And then like what and how, and seeing they can really be critical readers of news.
Amanda, I'd love to hear from you about some of the political dimensions of this, because you've got a classroom of kids whose parents are Republicans and Democrats. This is a sensitive topic. As you're teaching about fake news and media literacy in the context of social studies, what insights do you have to share around managing the balance or addressing the kids and your own ideological perspectives that enter into the classroom?
Yeah. So I think as a high school teacher, I think that I was really actually I was tiptoeing around this for a while, because it was really hard to, especially with the class and, knowing the community that they're coming from, and my own belief systems, and trying to wrestle with that. It was a little bit difficult, and I kind of walking on eggshells for a little while for the election, around the election, and I teach civics. So it's like, how can you walk on eggshells? How can you try to avoid it? But one thing that I've really tried to do is grab, headlines that come from all political, across the political spectrum, and looking at how do different media outlets tell the same story. They're not telling the same story, but how are they commenting on that story? And even like headlines are completely different. Images that they're using are completely different. Having students analyze the first 10 minutes of a Fox News broadcast in relation to the immigration ban versus, the MSNBC broadcast, and getting them to see that, political bias is brought into everything. And we can't say that, that my students are really sick of talking about fake news. They're sick of hearing the term fake news. And they really just want to say, like, where are the facts? Like, what's the truth? And the political spin, I think that they're really, conversations that we've had with them, they're like, this political spin is what's exhausting us. We just want to know, like, what's going on. Just give me like a list of facts, when we're talking about the immigration ban. Just tell me what did the executive order say? What did the judge say? And that's kind of where we had to analyze it. So seniors in high school, at this point, they're kind of like, we are not going to, when we talked about clickbait, I had one student say, like I said before, I showed them a headline with, the words, half the words were all caps. And they said, we don't click on that. That's sensationalized. And I thought, wow, you're using that word, you get it. But for some during this whole political cycle, they didn't, for adults, they didn't get it. They were clicking like crazy. But my students, so I thought that was pretty cool.
That's fascinating. Jared.
Yeah, thank you. I kind of, Amanda, I want to work right off that point because I think you're coming up right to a precipice that I feel from our side. And you talked about the students just wanting the truth, just wanting the facts. And I think there might be some danger to that thought. We talk about algorithms and we rely on it almost for a part of our critical thinking. It ends up being a filter for us. And for students to put themselves in a position where they're just looking for facts, it might be the easy way out rather than thinking about it more critically. And I'm just saying this from what I feel. So it's an interesting predicament, especially coming from our side from a website perspective, because we're trying to build a critical media literacy framework to send these students through. And getting them to engage about it without turning off in mid-part way through the rating is something that we're having to deal with. So I feel them wanting to just naturally leap onto something that's easy, another algorithm or another, here's your quick fix. But I think it's something much more deep than that.
I totally agree. I'm fascinated by that point. And I've been talking with my students about the idea of thought leadership, the concept from Walter Lippmann's 1921 book, Public Opinion, where he says, look, the world is way too complicated for us to be experts in everything, right? I can't be experts in the environment and experts in physics and nuclear war and experts in Syria and experts in Brazil and Latin America. I can't be expert in everything, right? But I have to be able to wisely choose my thought leaders, to wisely select who on this topic has the most trustworthy and believable information. And that process of figuring out who can you trust, that can't be shortcut by a list or by a, or by a friendship circle or by habit, right? So that idea, and Emily, you said it really well to me earlier today, the idea of pick your sources like you pick your friends. Can you talk to us about that metaphor?
Oh, yeah. So I don't have my presentation in front of me, but more or less it just came down to wanting to get the kids to think of news sources like their friends. So you mostly go to people that you've known for a long time. Like the longer you've known them, the more you're inclined to trust them. You want someone who's not going to be too dramatic. They're not just gonna like run into the room and be like, guess what happened? Like about everything. Like once in a while it's important, yes, but not every single thing. And someone who is gonna be real with you and not just tell you what you need, what you want to hear over and over again. And someone who knows a lot, like they always know what's happening, but they don't just share baseless gossip. So those are my main points, I think, with that metaphor.
I think that's absolutely charming. I am so glad that you shared it with us today. Now it's 7:56, so that's time for us to say goodbye. But before we do, I just want to invite you to, we today we reflected on our what we're learning about our experiences teaching fake news. There's a space here in the, I guess I didn't even show you, if you came in a little late, I didn't actually even show you where you can find this website, but at the Media Education Lab, let's see if I can get you there, right? Under, I guess this event has passed now. Under past events, there it is, teaching about fake news. We've put the little 8-minute interview that I did on BBC America a couple days ago, link to the Google Doc, the identifications of some of the participants, and I'm going to try to capture all of the participants. And if you guys can tweet me your name and affiliation, then I'll make sure to put you on the list. And we also want to invite you to poke around and take a look at some resources. One that you might have missed that I want to share with you is a wonderful website created by my former student and colleague, Mike Rob Greco. It's called Media Lunacy for Media Literacy. And what he does is he takes some examples of really hilarious media, and he kind of unpacks it from a media literacy point of view. And the quality of the choices he makes are amazing. Here's basically, if you're teaching a English class in high school or college, apophasis, the literary technique of asserting a denial by denying. He uses that concept to take on a really beautiful old Daily Show clip from 1999 where Jon Stewart basically critically analyzes media coverage of media, which right around now turns out to be a really important process. I also invite you to take a look at our crowdsourced gallery, Mind Over Media, Analyzing Contemporary Propaganda. We've got over 700 examples and some great lesson plans. Especially relevant, I think, to tonight's talk are the lesson plans about virality and about sponsored content. So I just want to thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar. It was great to have you here. We hope to continue to see you at other events, our Twitter chats, DigiURI, and our webinars. So we're gonna sign off now. If you guys can put your hands in the air. Here's how we sign off at the Media Education Lab. Oh, all the hands. We're signing off. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.